Another couple of days of riding had brought them deep into Romania's forests. The vegetation made it difficult to see or orientate oneself, although many trees were bare, yet the forests consisted of many kinds of evergreen plants, thick bushes and long leafy grasses. A rustle sounded from time to time from somewhere around them. Nathaniel automatically took his rifle when a wolf howled very close. Merrylegs only put his hand onto the one of the slightly alarmed man. "Do yourself a favor, Nate. Don't do anything rash. You shoot a werewolf, you are a dead man." "Have you ever met one before?" Dean asked curiously. "Once, though they won't remember me." "What are they like?" "Not so different from you, in fact. They tend to live in closed communities, keeping to themselves, but friendlier than vampires." "That's because vampires think themselves to be above everything." A deep, accented voice growled from in front of them. Dean hadn't noticed how a man had approached them, and judging by the others' faces, nor had they. Dean's own horse shied away when a wolf jumped from the nearby bushes to the man's side. Slowly he stroked the animal's neck to assure that everything was safe. The predator's brown-golden eyes studied them cautiously. The man in front of them was clothed like an ordinary human, but Dean suspected him to be a werewolf. "Well, well," Merrylegs said calmly, as if he was observing something completely ordinary. "I see you are still not fond of each other." "What are you doing in our territory?" the man demanded without returning the friendly approach. "Just passing through," the demon quickly answered. "Perhaps getting some help in finding a certain place. Why should I trust you? You could be vampires in disguise." "Do I look like bloody Dracula?" Merrylegs exclaimed with an insulted tone. "I wouldn't know," the man replied dryly. It was Nathaniel who got an idea to prove their humanity when he took a small pocket Bible from somewhere between his clothes. Holding it up, he said, "I reckon this is a very human thing to do." "You still carry a Bible?" "Every good Christian carry one." "You are not a good Christian, Nate. You kill, you steal, and you use the Lord's name in vain. And you are a demon who apparently read the Bible." "Fine, this one goes to you." Once again, $10 went from one owner to the other for what must have been the 20th time in the last couple of months. Wolf and man in front of them only watched as the two friends played their game. Dean could see in their eyes how the jesting nature was beyond their understanding. Obviously convinced of their innocence by the strange behavior, the man gestured to them to follow. None of them spoke as their guides led them through the entangled forest. Only Dean managed to whisper to Merrylegs, "They speak English." "Many werewolves are nomads. They speak many things," the demon whispered back. After many turns and twists, they finally reached a clearing with some small houses. In the middle was a big fireplace where a heap of burned wood was lying. Werewolves in human or animal form were occupied with their daily tasks. A woman was sewing clothes, a man carried a deer with biting marks, somewhere else 3 wolf cubs scuffled with each other. "Who's that, Edgar?" came the question from another man with the same accent, addressed to their guide. "Strangers," Edgar answered, cut short. "Not vampire strangers," Merrylegs added, taking off his hat, greeting the other man. "You can leave your horses with them," Edgar told them with a motion towards his kin. They dismounted and gave the bridle to the man, who seemed a bit friendlier than Edgar. When they went to follow their guide, however, Armand broke loose, running after Merrylegs. Whining, the stallion tossed his head from side to side. Taking the horse's head into his hands, Merrylegs spoke in a tender voice. "I will come back for you, and if not me, then Dean. For now you have to stay with the others." Armand only snorted, not moving from the spot. "Trust me, mate," the demon assured his companion, and indeed the animal trotted back to the other horses. A look at Edgar told Dean that Merrylegs had just gained the werewolf's respect. Edgar led them into one of the houses. An old man sat in a dimly lit room. There were no chairs or tables, but various skins covering the ground. The light came from a small fire which warmed the cozy room. "Greetings, travelers," the old man said while gesturing to them to sit down. Like a shaman, he wore feathers and bones around his neck, and his braided grey hair showed pearls of wood here and there. Although the old man's face, whom Dean presumed to be the leader, was covered in wrinkles, his eyes were clear. Dean didn't doubt that the leader's senses were still as sharp as his own, even sharper considering he was part wolf. "Now, how do demons and humans end up together like this?" the old man asked with the curiosity of a child. Merlice moved his crossed legs restlessly around before answering with the question. "Is it that obvious?" "It is to me," the werewolf replied with a smirk. "We are looking for something," Dean said in hope of taking the focus from his supernatural friend. Slowly the old man's eyes moved to Dean, waiting for him to say more. "Somewhere here, a ferryman must still carry the dead to the other world." Before the leader could answer, Edgar cut in. "Why should we show you? What's in it for us?" "Edgar!" the old man called him to order in a stern voice. "Don't insult your kin by acting like a vampire. Compassion has always been our guide. Kindness will be repaid with kindness. When did that ever work out for us?" Edgar shot back, even more agitated than before. "Your ways are from another time, father. They fade." Edgar got up and a low growl erupted from the leader's throat. The old man's eyes slightly shifted their color to an icy blue. "You are not Alpha yet." Unwilling to yield, Edgar stormed out of the house. The old man sighed. "You must apologize for my son's behavior. The conflict is wearing on him." "Is there anything we can do?" Dean started, but was stopped when Merlice gripped his arm and shook his head ever so slightly. "Your friend is right," the Alpha said. "You don't want to be part of this. Vampires are terrible enemies." Dean wasn't sure if the Alpha refused their help out of compassion or because his tribe wouldn't take it well. Since even Merlice tried to keep out, however, the young man believed the former to be the reason. "I won't ask Edgar to take you to the border. You may stay with us until dark. I will send someone to accompany you." "Thank you," Dean said upon exiting the room after Nathaniel and Melissa. "Merlice," Dean heard the old voice from behind him in the room. "Tread carefully. The enemy might still remember you." "He sure does," came the smooth reply from the demon. The four used the remaining time to lend a hand to the werewolves. Melissa was the first to offer help to a woman by washing and cooking. At first the tribe was suspicious, but his fiancée used her charm to gain some trust. And indeed she was allowed to help, even if some still observed her with suspicion. Nathaniel was quickly recognized as a man of action, and an especially muscular werewolf asked him to help with the hunt. "Be careful and don't draw any attention to yourself," Dean whispered to the American. When Nathaniel turned to go, Dean grabbed his shoulder to draw a symbol on his back. "What are you doing? The spell will make you practically invisible, but only if you keep your head down." "Thanks, kid." The older man smiled at the gesture. "You're a druid!" someone exclaimed from below. Looking down, the occultist saw a boy jumping up and down. "What? No, But it was no use, another member had already heard. Like a wildfire, the information spread through the tribe. Helplessly, Dean looked around for someone to save him, but Merlice had disappeared into thin air. Melissa was working, and Nate was out of range for now. "If you're a druid, can you cure my daughter? She's ill." A young woman approached him. Dean stammered. It seemed werewolves knew a great deal about magic, but couldn't use it. "I'll try my best," Dean managed to answer as the questions threatened to overwhelm him. "Let him breathe by the ancestors," sounded the harsh, grumpy voice of an old man. "But Korun, the woman said desperately. He's a druid. Yes, I gathered, woman. Don't you all have something to do? Reluctantly, the tribe members left Dean alone so he could see his savior. It was a strange fellow with short, tousled white hair. His face showed an expression of permanent misery which suggested he had not much to feel happy about. The green eyes examined Dean sternly as if he was looking for flaws he could then point out. Dean was not entirely sure if he should be happy or sad about the man who presented himself as his teacher. My name, Korun interrupted Dean before he had really started. Names are sacred. Don't share them with anyone beside your kin. But I know your name. Mistakes happen. Korun waved off the statement and turned to go. Dean looked at him, unsure of what he was supposed to do. Are you coming, youngster? Not wanting to anger the senior, Dean followed quickly. The first thing they did was to go to the medicine man of the tribe. There, Korun took various herbs which they needed to cure the girl. The problem with the girl is the herbs don't help on their own, but with your magic you can enhance their healing powers. Even when explaining something, Korun managed to sound grumpy. But I'm not sure I know how to, Dean managed to say when Korun stopped for a moment to breathe. At once the old man turned around and stared directly into Dean's eyes. How do you do it then, youngster? Trying to remain confident under the penetrating gaze, Dean drew a circle on his palm and summoned a small flame. He suppressed the urge to wince when the burning pain of the seer increased. Since he had summoned death, it had never really stopped hurting. A weaker form of the pain was constantly there, gnawing at his body, mind and soul. Dean hid it from the others. He knew they would worry, but he also knew it was the only way to be free. I see. You are using symbols as a catalysator. That won't work with our healing spells. How do you use magic? Come, I'll teach you inside. Together they went into the house, harboring the sick child. There, safely tucked into skins and woolen sheets, the little girl was sleeping. Her eyes looked feverish against the pale skin. Korun handed Dean the bundle of herbs. You need to become one with nature. How do I do that? Look inside, was the only not very helpful answer. Dean sighed inaudibly as he placed the herbs on the child's chest. Putting his hands onto the herbs, he closed his eyes, trying to sense something that might lead him. Relax, youngster. You're overlooking nature in your hurry. Paying heed, the young man forced himself to calm. With deep breaths, he emptied his mind from any thoughts about his uncle, the seer, or hell. He even tried to blank out the throbbing pain which surged through him in waves all the time. Everything he forgot for a moment until only darkness remained. Nothing happened. Panic about his own incompetence gripped him when Korun's voice sounded in the blackness. It wasn't the grumpy-sounding man, but a rather gentle tone. Easy now, youngster. Feel the herb's energy, their lifelight, given to them by the goddess of creation. There, somewhere in the dark, Dean felt a spark. He had never felt anything like it before. It seemed perfect, pure, complete. Dean wanted to touch it, to be part of it and never let go. As soon as he had thought the thought, strands of green light enveloped his mind. It felt like the soft wind on a warm summer's day, lightning and thunder as well as fire and tempest and the dark, cold winter night. He felt content. Suddenly he remembered what he wanted. He wanted to heal the girl. His palm felt as if on fire, causing him to open his eyes. What he saw surprised him. A green-golden light shone between his hand and the bundle of herbs. With all concentration he had, Dean commanded the magic inside the herbs to heal. Like water, the light streamed into the girl's body. Only a minute later, the pallor disappeared out of her face and she stirred awake. Seemingly cured, the child looked up to Dean with her brown eyes. Who are you? His answer was cut short when the seer sent a dozen daggers through Dean's body. Falling to his knees, he clutched his chest. He had to remind himself to breathe steadily, but a new wave of pain exploded in his mind, making him think his body was about to give out once and for all. He saw how Kulun hurried to his side, unable to understand what was happening. Guilty green eyes was the last thing he saw before everything went black. When Dean opened his eyes again, much to his relief, the air was cold and the sun was already setting. His entire body felt numb. Turning his head, he saw Melissa sitting on the ground next to him. "I'm sorry, my love." Looking up, Dean could see his own relief mirrored in her eyes. "It's getting worse, Dean. I don't want to lose you." Slowly he sat up, holding out his arms to embrace her. "I don't want to leave you either, but it's not just about us anymore." "I know." Melissa agreed, but her tone betrayed the rebel in her, who just wanted to run away with him. "Where's Kulun?" Dean asked when he couldn't see the old man anywhere. "After he had told me about you, he went into his hut and refused to come back." Dean got out from under the blanket and made his way to the werewolf's hut. He shivered when the sun's last beams disappeared and dusk enclosed the land. Upon knocking the door, a grumpy "Go away" sounded from within. Ignoring the old man, Dean entered. "Youngster!" Amidst the darkness, two green orbs stared at Dean in disbelief. The mask of the unfeeling, harsh man had crumbled away, leaving a broken, Dean believed even afraid, Kulun in front of him. "Thank you, Kulun. What I learned today will be of great use." For a moment, Kulun's mouth remained open. "But I almost killed you," he thundered angrily, though it wasn't clear what he was angry about. "No," Dean shook his head, still speaking in a calm voice. "You didn't. My uncle did." Dean sat down opposite of his teacher and told him about how his uncle had sealed away his gift. Kulun relaxed a bit when he understood what had happened in the girl's home. "Is this how demons use magic?" the young man asked in the end. "Using nature's spark?" "Not necessarily," Kulun replied, almost back to his old self. "Demons enchant you with their words. That's what makes them so dangerous to fools." "How do you know so much?" Dean finally asked, having gathered enough courage. Grinding his teeth, Kulun looked away from Dean. "I once was a druid," he confessed, ashamed. "I had a pupil, but I pushed him too far." He took a deep breath before continuing. "One night, when the vampires attacked, he decided to prove his worth to me." Kulun looked up at Dean. Sorrow lingered in his eyes. "He never saw the next sunrise. I had sacrificed our tribe's only druid. Because of me, there won't be another one until the next generation, and if I die before that, magic will be forgotten to us." "But you can still wield magic," Dean followed up, but Kulun shook his head mournfully. "The last great vampire attack left me without my powers. The cost for our short victory." Dean was at a loss for words. "I am sorry," was all he could manage to say. "Please, youngster," Kulun said as he came over and took Dean's hands into his own. "Promise you will come back and teach them if I should fail." The trust Kulun put in him left Dean speechless. "How will I know?" Taking the question as a confirmation, Kulun smiled after what Dean assumed to be a long time. "You will know," was all he said. A fire burned brightly when the two men left the hut to join the evening meal. The hunters had returned with a stag and a boar, which roasted over a flame. Around the fire, half of the tribe was already sitting, listening to a story told by the muscular man from earlier in the day. Trying to stay unnoticed, Dean sneaked up next to Melissa and Nathaniel. The former was listening eagerly to the words. "And then he really did it. We thought he was just bragging with his big gun and all, but no. Only an hour later he returned, springing out of the thicket like a mad fox. He was tailed by a boar. And what a beast! I think the fellow had deliberately angered the biggest one he could find. Around, the members of the tribe giggled, shooting looks at Nathaniel, who barely kept a straight face himself. "Didn't I tell you to keep quiet?" Dean whispered towards the older man. "I done keep quiet." Nathaniel showed a crooked smile. The animal was the one making a fuss. "I have never seen anyone climb a tree that quickly." The man had to pause for a moment when a smile prevented him from continuing his story. "Of course, we wouldn't leave him hanging there and quickly kill the beast." The werewolf ended the story. "You should have seen your faces the first moment," Nathaniel called out. "It was like you had seen a ghost." Again the tribe laughed when the teller's story was turned on himself. "To our guests," he said before stepping away to get some food. The mood was quite merry, considering there was a war going on for the werewolves. The girl's mother thanked Dean for his efforts, and even Edgar seemed to be less hostile. Upon getting some food for himself, Dean saw a raven sitting on one of the roofs. "There you are," Dean called out to the demon. "I was almost dying, and where were you?" "I was everywhere," Merrilies replied, not in the least sorry for being away. "I knew you would be fine. Besides, you have a wife." He gestured with his head towards Melissa. "I'm sure she cares a lot more about you than I ever could." With that, the raven took off and disappeared in the dark night.